In the mist-shrouded mountains of northern Hispania, a war unlike any other tested the mettle of Rome's legions. It was 25 BC. The Emperor Augustus himself commanded the campaign, determined to end the surprise Cantabrian and Asturian, tribes whose opposition had resisted centuries of conquest. Among those troops marched the Legio IX Hispana, battle-scarred after decades of war from Hispania to Gaul. 10 determined years, they would fight in a pitiless world of deep gorges, racing rivers, and treacherous passes, where the enemy struck like ghosts, dissolving before Rome's steel could touch them. It was not Caesar's open-field victory in Gaul. It was ambush, famine, and attrition, a conflict in which even Rome's finest might be consumed by the wild. This is the overlooked story of the Cantabrian Wars, and the 9th Legion's bloody path to victory. By 27 BC, the Roman Republic had ceased to exist. Octavian was Augustus, the first emperor, and with his new powers came the desire to pacify each border of his vast empire. Hispania was generally at peace, its rich silver mines already filling Rome's coffers. But far to the north, beyond the lush green valleys of the Cantabrian mountains, there lived two bellicose nations who as yet were unconquered, the Cantabri and the Asturians. They had repelled every Roman invasion for over a century, striking from mountain strongholds and melting away into the landscape before the legions could counterattack. To Rome, their resistance was more than a nuisance. Northern Hispania's mineral wealth and ports were key to consolidating Roman supremacy in the west. The northern tribes were the last stain on Augustus's dream of a united Hispania, and he would remove it. In 26 BC, Augustus himself traveled to Hispania to take charge of the war effort, unheard of for an emperor. He summoned 3 entire Roman armies into the region, including the battle-hardened Legio IX Hispana. Their mission, to crush Cantabrian resistance once and for all. The 9th Legion was no stranger to these kinds of wars. They had fought with Caesar in Gaul and understood that the Cantabri would not be defeated in a single-pitched battle. This would be a war of sieges, ambushes, and grinding pursuit. The mountains ahead were a natural fortress, steep ridges, hidden passes, and thick forests where the enemy would strike from concealment. The campaign was underway, and the 9th Legion was marching straight into a land that had swallowed entire Roman armies in the past. The Cantabrian mountains rose up like a saw-bladed wall, their peaks hidden behind impenetrable mist and primeval forests. The land was uncomely, but the more dangerous enemy was the Cantabrians themselves, tough mountainmen with a personal familiarity with every rock and den. To them, the Romans were invaders, strangers who had no experience of mountain warfare. They fought guerrilla, ambushes, night attacks, and sudden disappearing into the countryside. The 9th Legion were ill-prepared for this type of warfare. Their heavy armor, ordered formations, and siege engines were meant for open battlefields, not the congested passes and dense woods of Cantabria. The legionaries had to improvise or perish. Roman scouts warned of small Cantabrian bands ambushing supply columns, destroying grain stores, and raiding lone forts. Every fight was a cat-and-mouse war of slaughter, where the landscape inclined to the defenders at every turn. The 9th built fortified camps, maintained tight patrols, and learned to use auxiliary horsemen and local guides to chase down the elusive enemy. In spite of the difficulties, the 9th's experience and training put them at an advantage. Gradually, the legion edged further into Cantabria, seizing critical mountain passes and removing the mobility from the enemy. Each victory was dearly bought, but the legions were unstoppable, motivated by Rome's orders and a need to finish this obstinate resistance once and for all. One of the most brutal fights of the Cantabrian Wars was fought at a mountain pass so narrow that the 9th Legion was in a deadly bottleneck. The enemy had blocked the road with fallen trees and massive boulders, channeling the Romans into this kill zone. As the legionaries pushed forward, Cantabrian warriors rained down a torrent of javelins and stones upon them from the heights above. The terrain was unfriendly. There was no room to maneuver, no way of building their legendary testudo shield walls. The 9th's own discipline was pushed to the limit. Centurions ordered their men to hold their ground, as auxiliary unit archers were shooting back from outcroppings exposed. Reinforcements came to clear obstructions of rubble, but each effort was under ferocious attack. There were hours of fierce battle, hand-to-hand combat in which shields crashed and gladi clanged in the darkness of high cliffs. The Ninth edged the Cantabrians back steadily, but at a costly rate to both sides. The fight demonstrated the brutality of mountain warfare and taught the lesson of the need for adaptability. From then on, the Ninth Legion adopted new tactics better suited to the rugged landscape: reduced units, surprise moonlight marches, and greater utilization of light troops and horsemen. The Cantabrian strength lay in their fortified hill forts, oppida, perched atop pointed ridges. These natural strongholds were virtually impenetrable, protected by wood palisades and rock defenses. The Ninth Legion, masters of siege warfare, proceeded to besiege for weeks and months. The capture of one of these fortresses, Aracillum, was a turning point. The Ninth came with engineers and siege equipment, battering rams, towers, and catapults. Under the fire of hostile missiles, they constructed ramps to break down the walls. Cantabrians fought valiantly on the walls, launching stones and showers of arrows at them. The struggle continued for weeks. Roman discipline won out as the siege taxed morale and energy. Finally, under cover of darkness, the Ninth broke through the gates. Wild hand-to-hand combat flared in the close streets, and at dawn, the hill fort was quiet, overawed by Roman authority. The fall of Aracillum broke the psychological backbone of Cantabrian opposition and brought open season on Roman dominance of the region. Though their forts were taken, the Cantabrians would not surrender. They scattered in mountains and woods and made repeated guerrilla raids. The Ninth Legion struck back by splitting into smaller mobile units, building fortified outposts, and employing auxiliary troops seasoned in mountain fighting. The Romans were instructed to scout ahead cautiously, setting traps and maintaining secure supply routes. Each advance was met with ambushes, surprise volleys of arrows, hidden spears, and quick surprise raids on camps. The war became an endurance test, testing the will of each soldier. Against all odds, the Ninth's grit was to be rewarded. Village after village and small fortresses were lost. The Cantabrians, increasingly short of resources and under constant pressure, watched their defenses crumble. The campaign became a grueling attrition, a war of endurance, during which the legionaries combated not just the foe, but the land itself. By 20 BC, Roman dominance had solidified. Cantabrians and Asturians, increasingly hemmed in, launched desperate counterattacks, but the Ninth Legion and other allied legions pushed on relentlessly. Emperor Augustus himself had sent reinforcements and tightened supply lines to prevent further raids. The Romans swept in campaigns across mountain ridges and valleys, systematically destroying rebel camps and sealing cave entrances. Prisoners were taken south as warnings to others. The fierce mountain warriors, once the scourge of Rome's northern frontier, were now brought under control. By 19 BC, the Cantabrian Wars were at an end. The northern provinces became Roman, roads were built, and Roman law was enforced. For the Ninth Legion, their decade-long campaign had been a showcase of their discipline, stamina, and adaptability. They had not so much defeated an enemy as a nation. The Ninth Legion's triumph in the Cantabrian Wars set the northern border of Rome for centuries. Its experience set a new benchmark in warfare in mountains, blending discipline with mobility and adapting to new terrain. The war was the last great struggle in Hispania, allowing the empire to prosper economically and culturally. The Ninth's veterans spoke of fierce mountain warfare and ghostly enemies who tested every bit of Roman will. Though centuries later, the Ninth Legion would march east and vanish into the pages of history, their own record in northern Hispania endures, a story of perseverance, courage, and victory in one of Rome's toughest campaigns.